One. Welcome to another episode of My Wake-Up Call. Not sure if this will be an episode, but we might turn it into one because I have one of my favorite people in the world back again. And you may not know his name, but for many years, he was the CEO of a company of one of your favorite products that fixes everything. So Garry Ridge, for many years, was the CEO of WD40. In fact, we had a lot of rain in Los Angeles a week ago, and we knew we had some WD-40 somewhere in the house. Everybody else does because our doors were, all stuck, and it helped. It opened it. And Garry was on the show a couple of years ago, and he's transitioned, and he's not retired. He's refired, and he's going to fill us in. And I'm so proud to know him, and I'm so glad that he's able to go around the world, sharing his positive wisdom. Everything he says is uplifting. In fact, here's a book title for you, because I give away book titles, and this one hasn't been taken. Generous Leadership: How to be positive, optimistic, supportive, and kind in a world that isn't. That's you. Take the book, run with it. But you get a lot going. So Garry, great to have you here. And
thank you.
And what I would like you to do is give us a little update on your refiring, but also drop some nuggets of wisdom that you have gleaned over your career, over your lifetime. We both have a mutual love affair with Ken Blanchard, but you get to play golf with him, and I just hear about it from you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I was privileged and honored to lead WD40 Company for 25 years as their CEO, 35 years with the company, and I stood down from my role as CEO at the end of August last year. I'd been planning my succession for 8 years, and it was time for me to finish my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership, because I think that's what it was. And I've now refired. And the reason I call it refired, another dear friend of ours is Marshall Goldsmith. And Marshall said to me quite a few years ago, Garry, after doing what you do, you can't float into a void. You need to start continuing to pay it forward. And I truly believe that, Mark, in that, I truly believe that business has the best opportunity to impact people's lives. And if we can create a place where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to a purpose bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they're protected and set free by a compelling set of values and go home happy, something happens. Happy people create happy families create happy communities, and happy communities create a happy world. And by golly, we need a happy world. So now in my retirement, I'm taking my learning moments, the things that I've learned over that 25 years, my scar tissue, which I have plenty of, and I'm sharing it with CEOs and others around the world, because we have a job to do. And so often we try to protect our own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development. And truly, when you really realize the love you have for people, leadership is love. And the deeper your love is for people, the more you have to let go of your own comfort zone and step into that place with them to help them step into the best version of their personal self. So that's my little update. And, I finished my career with a great song. I had the time of my life, and I owe it all to you. And I do owe it all to the people that I had the privilege to lead for 25 years.
Well, I want to share something with you. I've started co-hosting a radio show on UK Health Radio. It's an internet radio station. It's the leading talk health radio channel in the world. It's based in the UK. And we have a show called Hurt Less, Live More with JJ, my co-host, and Dr. Mark. And on our first show, I hope I'll make this relevant to what you just said. We had the CEO of UK Health Radio on, but one of the things we talked about was basically what makes a good person like Queen Elizabeth II. And what makes a good person is when you're willing to hurt more so the people you love hurt less. Because she wanted to raise horses. She didn't want to be queen. It was given to her when she was 22. I remember her speech. She said, I'm going to live my life serving you. And she was a source of stability. And she hurt more by not being able to have a free, carefree life. And I'm just sharing that with you because you're a good person. You're willing to take the hit and hurt more and be that leader so that the people you love and lead can hurt less. So I just wanted to share that with you because it's true of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we have an opportunity. I've often said life's a gift, don't send it back unwrapped. And if as leaders we can help unwrap the wonderful things that go on in the world to help people do and enjoy what they do. Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC, said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I was fortunate enough back when I was first given the opportunity to lead WD40. I was on an aeroplane flying from Los Angeles to Sydney, 38,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. Probably the only light that was on in the area of the seat, and I was reading, and I read something of the Dalai Lama, and it was, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And that's when my aha light went on, and I looked around. I said, there are so many leaders hurting people. That's not right. And it was actually the catalyst to me meeting our dear friend, Dr. Ken Blanchard, because Ken is the guru of servant leadership, and it's through that trigger that I then went to the University of San Diego, where I met Ken and did my master's degree in leadership, and then took all that I've learned and tried to put it to work. And it was what created the happiness in the organization. And 98% of people at WD40 company globally say they love to tell people they work at the company. And how can you love to tell people you work at a company that sells oil in a can? Where's the love there? But what they love is we're a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. And that's what's really so special about the culture at WD40. And from that, the culture became a competitive advantage because we had high will of the people, a reasonable strategy and high will of the people.
Yeah, are you familiar with Fred Reichheld? He wrote The Ultimate Question and The Ultimate Question 2.0.
No.
So The Ultimate Question is the Net Promoter Score.
Huh.
Which a lot of big companies use, which is, would you recommend these products or services to a friend or family member? The Ultimate Question 2.0 was, would you recommend this company to other people if you work there? And a 9 or 10 is really good. And if you wouldn't recommend your company to friends or family, you got a problem. And I know that your people feel that way. If we were to create an avatar of your people, and we can use that because there's a movie out with that name, but if we created an avatar, and I'm sure if we were to ask them, if you were to sing your praises about WD40, what would you tell friends or family about the company? What do you think that avatar would say to friends and family?
I'm safe.
Ooh. You just hit me in the heart. Talk more about that.
So through COVID, we were conscious of the fact that, we changed the way we were working. We'd gone from being together and to being virtual overnight. And one of the things that was on my mind was, is this draining our cultural equity? Because belonging and connection is so important, even though we were in reality a very virtual company, operating in, 17 different countries, 176, locations of where people can buy up. It's huge. So in the middle of COVID, this is January 2021, no vaccine yet. Still this huge amount of uncertainty around, will we survive as a human race? But the company's doing okay. What we called isolation renovation was going on because people were hearing that squeaky hinge more than ever. But I was concerned about whether we were losing cultural equity. We were doing everything we could to keep that connection. So I did a mid-year employee opinion survey check-in where, we've been doing employee opinion surveys since 1999 or the year 2000. And one number came back that I was intrigued about. 98% of the people globally said, I am excited about my place in the company's future. And I went, what? Here we are in the middle of COVID. And I went out and I said, wait a minute, I need to find out whether there's some issue with this data. So we went back and we probed a little bit. And what we learned was, if we can get through this together, we can get through anything together, was the message. So people felt safe. And I think that was one of the biggest gifts that we had at that time, that, people felt safe. They knew that we were a group of people that came together every day to protect and feed each other. And that's what we were doing. We were getting ready for the future, one that we were very unsure of.
So, how do you promote these messages to the world that the world needs so much? Or maybe you just say, look, we're not forcing our message or what we've learned on the world. We attract people who, want to learn how to do it. We're not trying to convince people who are just focused on ROI at the expense of their people. That's just, they can go succeed however they're doing. So how do you promote your message out into the world?
Well, I think results actually have a loud voice. And, over a 25-year period, the company had a compounded annual growth rate of total shareholder return of about 14% a year. So if you'd bought $100 worth of WD40 stock, and we're a public company, around the year 2000, in 2022, that $100 was worth about $1,700. We'd 6x the revenue, and we had an employee engagement score of 93%. 98% of people said they love to tell people they worked at the company. 97% of them said, I respect my coach. Now, their coach is their manager, because words matter, right? So we took the word manager out. You manage your bank account, you manage inventory, you don't manage people. Your job is to be their coach. And what's the job of a coach? A coach never runs on the field. A coach doesn't try and kick the ball. A coach spends a lot of time on the sideline observing the play, and a lot of time in the locker room building trust. And their job is to help the player understand where they can play their better game. And so the people said they respect their coach. Now, remember, most people leave their job because they hate their boss. And here's the word respect. We didn't say, did you like? We said, do you respect your coach? Which I thought was so strong. And the reason they respect their coach is that the coach was helping them win. The book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, Helping People Win at Work, it's all about, don't mark my paper, help me get an A. And our job as leaders is not to mark people's papers, it's to help them get an A. And what do you need to know about that? What does an A look like? If an A walked in the room today, how would I know what it was? And how do I help people get to that A? So I think that's what's important is results matter. So one of the things that I'm fortunate about is I am convinced that high will of the people and good strategy deliver great results. Why am I convinced? Because we did it. We did it. We continue to do it. The company is continuing to go on under the new leadership of our new CEO, someone who's been in the company for 31 years. I was so focused on ensuring that our next leader understood that culture is the core, the competitive core of our organization, and it's all about the people. So how do we get the word out? Well, we prove it. And I sit with CEOs and I say, I don't understand why you don't understand this. Strategy is important, but execution's important. And if Aristotle was right, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. What's our job as leaders? To put pleasure in the job. And that will deliver on your strategy. You'll have great people going home happy, which is more important to me because we damn need a happy world. And, I think I've heard you say this, but why would anybody want to go and work in a company if their parents come home every night saying how horrible it is? Like, yeah, well, sign me up to Jerk Inc. I want to go work there. No, I want people going home saying, I really enjoyed where I went to work today because I was treated with respect and dignity. People cared about me. They were candid with me. They held me accountable. I was allowed to be responsible. I learned something new. I felt like I was making a contribution to a purpose that was important and bigger than myself. I matter and I belong. Because people want to know, do they matter and do they belong? Because if you matter and you belong, then you're filling that space. You know that better than I do. So that's really what's important.
Yeah, spend a little time on the handoff and succession, because too frequently, I guess the prior CEOs don't love their people and care about their people, and the handoff doesn't work that well. And then sometimes a company can flounder with a new leader. And so can you give us a mini masterclass in this is how we did succession and how you're leaving WD-40 in the best of hands?
Sure. Well, firstly, it was intentional. I started planning this 8 years ago. And the first thing was to identify people in the organization, because the number one objective was it had to be internal because they had to understand the culture. And then I learned something from my daughter. My daughter is a dance teacher and a world-renowned dance judge. And she said to me one day, Dad, before you would ever put a dancer on Broadway, you have to see him dance off Broadway, because you can then identify which steps they need to improve on. And I said, that is so true. So we identified some people in the organization. I started to put them off Broadway and have them dance and see which ones had the best steps. And eventually we zeroed down and we identified Steve Brass as our new CEO. He was actually based in the United Kingdom. And he'd been with us then 23, 24 years. He had won the confidence of our European tribe. So that was a good thing. And I said, well, Steve, if you had the opportunity to lead the company in the future, the first thing you need to do is move to the United States and see if you culturally as a family feel okay here, because if you don't, it won't work. So he transferred over from the UK to the US. He came in as the president of our Americas division. And the objective there was to see if he could win the trust of the Americas division, because if he had the trust of the European division and the Americas division, he had the trust of 80% of the company. And he did. And then he then moved into, just before COVID started, I put him into the role as president COO, and I was the CEO. So it was then very obvious, I guess, that he was the successor. And Steve got to ride alongside me in the sidecar of my motorbike for two years. And then we formally announced the succession about 6 months before I was to step down. And people could see that Steve and I were united and he's quite a different person to me, but the one thing that we do have is we do share the same values of the organization. We both understand culture is great. And then it was time for me to step back. And I stood back and I put Steve forward. And my absolute goal was to help him have the most seamless transition as possible. And we did that, and I got out of the way. And you know, I think that was important too, because I didn't hang around as, you know, I'm here for him if he wants me. I'm now chairman emeritus, which I love that because I have no responsibility, no authority, but I can go to any party I like. So I think that's a pretty good job. But I'm still a strategic advisor to him if he wants me. But I know that he's going to carry on. And the first thing he did is he went out on a listening tour. Just funny about that, just listen, right? He went out on a listening tour all around the world, listening to the leadership. What do you want me to do? What's different? How do you want me to change? You know, what should I know that I don't know? And he took all that listening in and he distilled it down, and then he put out his strategic initiatives, which our strategy remained the same, but he had some strategic priorities that he wanted to put out there. And he's off doing that. And actually, I was just with him last week in New York City. Together, we opened the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, celebrating the 50-year anniversary of WD40 as a listed company and the 70th birthday of the company. And most companies last average 18 years. And here we are, this little company celebrating 70 years and 50 years on NASDAQ.
You know, I can listen from multiple points of view. And if I was someone, a CEO focused on shareholder value, stock price, near-term events, if I was in the audience, I think the message I would need to hear, but I wouldn't want to hear, but Garry Ridge could deliver it, is I am here to embarrass and cause people to feel ashamed if they don't focus on their people. I'm not here to lay a guilt trip, but everything about what's made us succeed is focusing on our people and developing them and promoting from within. Because as you're describing it, I'm thinking, why would any company want to hire a CEO from without when there's certainly people in the company that they could develop into the next CEO position? And yet you see so many companies, it's almost like we don't trust anyone in our company or have confidence, so we're going to grab someone from another company who doesn't know our culture, and they're going to take our company. It's going to crash and burn.
Yeah. Well, I think it's succession and leadership development is important, and that gets back to the core of, we call ourselves a tribe because of the elements of tribal leadership. It's not about any indigenous group. Tribes go back to the beginning of time. And, there are two things that are important in a tribe. Number one, the number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. And that's so true. If we were to go back in a time warp and be able to travel to my homeland of Australia and observe an indigenous group of Australians at a tribal meeting, what would the tribal leader be doing? He'd be teaching the young tribe member to throw a boomerang. Why? Because the boomerang was the tool of survival. So it's very clear to me that the number one responsibility of a leader is to be a learner and a teacher. That's why we're there. And succession planning is about teaching and helping people learn. And the second one is belonging. One of the biggest desires we have as human beings is to belong. Maslow's hierarchy to self-actualization. First two rungs, am I safe? Will I survive? Third one, love and belonging. Oh, don't use that word love in organizations. That's garbage. Love them up. And as I said to you at the beginning of our conversation, the more you love your people, the braver you are as a leader to help them step into the best version of their personal self, because you're not protecting your own comfort zone at the expense of their development. And so many of us protect our own comfort zone because we don't want to have that conversation that's important around coaching, because we're the ones that feel uncomfortable about it. But we need to have that conversation. And love is what drives brave leadership.
That's so true. My podcast is conversational, as we're having a conversation here. And every now and then I'll have a guest on who's really sort of more motivational and more alpha than they are inspirational. And I'll say to them, and I don't have to say this to you at all, and I'll say this on the podcast, I have good news and bad news. The good news is I like you. The good news is if we developed a relationship, I would love you. The bad news is you really have a great mission and you need to do everything you can that distracts from it. And you're coming off as too forceful and not formidable. And you need to stand for something. That's what being formidable is. You need to stand for your people. You need to stand for the problem your products or services serve and feel the honor and privilege of doing that. And you're being too forceful, which may cause people to smile, and you may be motivating in speaking to people. But as soon as the pump leaves, they're going to stop smiling and they're not going to do anything. And I'm only doing this because if you could stand for something and stand up for it, as opposed to trying to be pushy, you'll reach your potential. And, and I'm preaching to the choir because you're just, everything. I am so thankful to you, because this was going to be a conversation where I thought, well, can you drop some nuggets of wisdom on us? And it's been nonstop, Garry. You're like a coffee grinder. You drip wisdom, and the wisdom is heartfelt and other people centered. So it's not like I'm the wise person, listen to me. It's just, it just comes across that you feel so honored to have been on this journey, learn what you've learned, be mentored by Ken Blanchard.
Yeah.
I'm just blown away.
Well, thank you. You might have heard me say it often, and I mean it. I'm consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right in most circumstances. And that's, again, if you as a leader want people to support you, then you better respect them and win their trust. Because if you don't, they're not going to support you. And as leaders, we need the support, because we can't do it on our own. It's impossible. We can't. We need it. It's not about you. I over in the back of my shoulder there, you can see Al, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And I created him or her, it could be Alice, to be able to talk about these leadership traits that create toxic cultures. And in his case, the biggest issue Al or Alice has is that their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. That's it. That's their biggest issue. It's all about them instead of all about how I feel about the people I'm with and for the people I'm with and alongside the people I'm with.
That is brilliant. I'm just tingling all over, Garry. Could be COVID, but I think it's off the top of your head. There's so many excerpts from this, I can't believe it. But off the top of your head, because people like tactics. If you want to win or earn trust of your people, do this. And if you want to lose their trust, keep doing these other things? How would you answer that?
Do this, be vulnerable, show your real self, and don't think it's all about and don't think it's all about you, because it's not all about you. We are here to serve. So that's what I see is be vulnerable, show yourself, show your real self. People want to see your real self. You mentioned Queen Elizabeth before. In a new book that I'm currently writing, um, there's a chapter called "Even the Queen Sits Down to Pee."
Yes.
And that my mother told me that. My mum lived till she was 99 years and 9 months old. And one of the lessons I learned from her in life is, Garry, even the Queen sits down to pee. You need to understand who you are and be humble. And you don't have to be the limelight. So be who you need to be in the space you need to be in.
So this will be kind of a contradictory question, because I'm asking you a question where you would say, well, Mark, if I answer that question, I'm not being humble, but I would like you to share, if we were to ask that avatar of your company, of WD40, give us some examples of Garry being vulnerable over the years, maybe Garry being vulnerable during COVID. So if we were to ask them, there was this meeting or he showed up this way, and and we felt safe because by showing up that way, we trusted him. I mean, we just trusted him. So what would be some examples to our listeners or viewers about the do's and don'ts if you want to earn trust and not lose it?
Oh, one of the common ones during COVID was how you screwed up on virtual communication calls. It was like, you're on mute. Oh, again, that's me. Sorry. 20 years ago, I guess being vulnerable was riding a horse in a suit of armor into Times Square to open the NASDAQ stock exchange, doing crazy stuff. I think, being able to say genuinely, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I'm consciously incompetent. I'm probably wrong and roughly right. I don't have to have all the answers. The birth of the learning moment, which was one of the huge, catalysts of freedom in our company, where we said, we're going to take the word mistake and throw it out the window. And we're going to call things learning moments, because I don't hear people running down corridors shouting out at a loud voice, I'm a failure. But if you think about it, all successes come from failures. So let's call them learning moments. And the definition of a learning moment being a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. And you'll hear at our organized, or WD40 now, company now, every day, people, I just had a learning moment. So it opens up that transparency. They're not afraid anymore to admit that 80% of things don't work. Let's work out the 20 and let's make sure we understand the 80.
No, I love that. I love that. Something I've been telling, I have a guest coming for another podcast episode in a few hours, and what I tell the PR agencies who reach out to me is, I use the podcast to learn, and my listeners want to learn, and they want to be taught. They don't want to be sold or convinced. And I just love that reframe. Garry, you're my friend, and I'm so glad we're meeting again. And I'm in a stage in my life where I never was a star, and I want to sort of pull back a little bit, focus on my family. But when I run into people like you, I want to do everything I can to get you into the world. I mean, you're already in the world, but
Thank you.
it would be my privilege and honor to get you even more into the world.
Oh, thank you. And I it's not a mutual admiration society, but I tell you, the amount of learning and the amount of sage advice, and I think I've said it to you before, that you've shared with people. I was just reading your other summary the other day again. Listen to crazy, and I mean, I love. How many times do we deal with people where we don't know how to understand them? But thank you. We're all doing our little bit to make the world a better place, and that's what's important to us. Is that how do we leave the world a little better? And there's a job to do right now because the world is not good right now, and we need to send people home happy. And business has the biggest opportunity to touch people every day. So let's do our work. Let's not be lazy. That's why after 25 years as leading CEO of WD40, I'm refired. And that's, Ken wrote a book on that. Don't retire, refire. So that's what I'm doing.
You certainly are. Any ideas about, because you mentioned it several times, the business world is best positioned to make some of the big changes in the world. Any idea about how to infuse politicians with what good business people like not bad business people, but boy, business people can get stuff done that politicians never do. Any ideas about how to cross over and help them get the message?
I, you know, I don't know how you do that. I think that there are, who wants to be one anyhow? That's the thing. There are so many opposing forces that are attacking them all the time. And I often say no good deed goes unpunished. For them, that is amplified to the nth degree. And then, nobody's perfect, but if you're a politician, your opponent's going to go out there. And if you made one little error in your life, they're prepared to blow up the good you do by amplifying something that was insignificant in the past. And then you turn on the TV and you hear them speak and you go, but that's a lie. That's not true. How can you say that? Oh, it's just politics. Is politics just as open as that? It's nothing I could ever. It's just I don't know.
So I come up with these little quippy quotes and so I'm going to drip one because you just inspired one. There's people who can't do teach, and people who can't do or teach run for office.
Oh dear, that's
So thank you for your time, and thank you more for your friendship, Garry. It means to me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you.
We'll have to do it more regularly. So where can people find out more about you and what you're up to and how to support you? What's the best way for people to support you in your refired identity?
Follow me on LinkedIn. Share some of the sharing that I put out there, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Garry Ridge at LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I have a website, www.thelearningmoment.net, which I do my post blogs and other information on. But LinkedIn is a great place. So follow me on LinkedIn, and you'll be up to date.
Mm-hmm. Would it be okay for me to tell you that I love you?
Thank you. I love you too. Love is a wonderful thing.
It really is. It really is. So thank you, Garry. And to our listeners, please listen to this episode multiple times. Please share it with people. Please share it with people in a leadership position. And when those people who need it but don't want it, after they listen to it, in a very loving and supportive way, ask them what's going on underneath that they're so cynical. And let them open up to you why it is that they can't trust wonderful messages and food for thought like you've provided. So please do that if you're listening or you happen to see a video of this. And until next time, take care. And when wake ups calls come your way, wake up, don't beat up on yourself, and turn the all the wake ups of your people into learning moments. And we'll see you again. Take care, everyone.